Hi, today I want to show you how to first of all figure out the performance and the performance score of your web application and also ways to improve that and some things that are absolute performance killers. So let's get right started. So we're going to use the site pagespeedinsights.web.dev, and the cool thing is it gives us a whole report of the performance, accessibility, best practices, and SEO for mobile and desktop, because there's a difference between those. Desktop devices have more power, mobile devices have less. So it is important that when we are building web applications that we consider mobile users, because if you are trying to turn your Wized web app into a native mobile app, which is easily possible. I'll make a video about that, I think like in 2 weeks or so, because I'm still waiting for Apple to approve my app. If anyone is working at Apple watching that video, please hurry up. But, this is where it gets very important. We want to make sure that it works for mobile and desktop. So let me show you how to figure this out. So let's start with a different project where I know this will not look too good for me. Let's go to chart.js. And it may seem nice to use something as beautiful as chart.js, but those things come at a price, and let me show you why. If we're going to look, and let's look at mobile for any website we incorporate chart.js on, we will see that the performance will look completely different. And this is because we're introducing a lot of dependencies, aka JavaScript libraries, and they are very heavy. I'll show you what I mean. So actually, it's not that bad as I thought. We have a great performance. We don't have best practices here. And we see, okay, that is on Webflow, but we see that, interesting. We are loading this dependency in here, and it's not ruining the performance, but it is certainly making it a bit slower. And looking at this library, it's not that big. It's rather, for a JavaScript library, chart.js actually, as it seems, is not as big as I thought. It's rather lightweight. So chart.js is probably a bad example, but our friends at AGGrid are not holding back on, let's say, performance. AGGrid is very heavy. So let's see how a bad result looks if we add AGGrid on here. So here we go. And we're going to go into yellow, or not yellow, to orange. Let's see, maybe we go down to yellow, but we're going to go to orange. Probably, very likely, because it is a very, yes, you see we got 60 performance. That is not great on mobile. I mean, accessibility is good, best practice is SEO, but performance is a big downside. But it works great. It's in the green on desktop. But if you start introducing complex SDKs, you're seeing here we got some red, we got, it's not great. And if I'm going to look what it points out, besides when it's, screaming at Wized, we see the biggest thing, of course, jQuery, but that is Webflow. We can influence that, and we're loading quite something with Wized, which is not much. Like, it's rather lightweight if you look at that. But the biggest thing, look at that. Wized gives you 1, and the max is 13, and here we have 312. It's by far the highest. Even jQuery is just 30. And this is the dependency we are loading in for AGGrid. I'm not saying that AGGrid is bad. AGGrid is great for web applications. It's just not something you want to use for your mobile application or for a web app that will be used primarily by mobile users, because we all know your computer is way more powerful than your mobile device, right? Unless you're using the newest iPhone with all upgrades and all of that, which in reality we may use for development. We may develop this on a super great computer, but the user at the end doesn't have a super great computer, doesn't have a $10,000 computer or $5,000 or even a $2,000 computer, and certainly doesn't have a $2,000 iPhone, right? So we always need to keep our users in mind. And most of the times when we build something, it works great on our side and it doesn't work that great on the user side because we are not thinking about, how the user is interacting with that. And I could talk now for ages. We are still scrolling through the code for HGrid. So I just want to show it's a rather heavy JavaScript library. So before you go crazy in adding SDKs and SDKs and SDKs inside of your web applications in Wized, always check how long they are and if they are really worth it. Because if you can build, let's say you would use an SDK to build something like this here, right? You can certainly use an SDK, but you would probably load a lot of dependencies in there. Now, those are like Webflow components we made using some custom code. And if I'm going to compare this against an SDK, we see we will have a better performance. I think even maybe slightly better than HGrid, which we could use to build something similar. Maybe even a bit worse because, I'm not a programmer, but we're going to see that right now. But, if you can build those components, it's, accessibility isn't great, but, performance is good. And, if I build those components natively in Webflow and make them work with Wized, they will be more lightweight than an HGrid. Now, we have an HGrid as an alternative, right? So we see HGrid is 60. It's horrible. Now, let's look at FinSuite Table, right? So how is FinSuite Table performing? Actually, I'm curious now. Let's hope it's not bad. Okay, here you go. Let's go to that and let's see how FinSuite Tables is doing. Hopefully better than 60 in performance. Let's see. Okay, it's loading. That's a good sign. It's not perfect because it's an HTML table, I guess. And okay, that's Webflow. That's a logo. It doesn't like the logo. Okay. It's better. It's 20 points better. It's not perfect, but it's still very good. And it is probably the way I built that. Now, because this was a very complex build, it's an HTML table, and we are rendering it dynamically, and there are a lot of different icons that are loaded in there from libraries. So it is a very, I have to say, this FinSuite Table project was a very complex Wized build, and even itself a very complex Webflow build. And even though there are so many different components nested inside of each other, and they're all made dynamically, and there's a lot of JavaScript involved, we still have a better performance than using an SDK for the same thing. Now, I'm not saying stop using SDKs. This is on mobile. It is miraculous on desktop. But I'm pointing out, if you're building something mobile first, you want to use less SDKs if this is a web-based version of that web app that will be used in the browser because you'll have limited resources in there. You want to use Webflow components first if possible. Now, if not, don't drive yourself crazy and don't use SDKs and just hard code that in. Then you want to introduce SDKs. But whenever you can build it yourself, try to build it yourself if it is mobile first and use less SDKs. Now, if this is only for mobile, don't care. Jam as much SDKs as you are in there. For desktop, if it's only for desktop, put as much SDKs in there as you want. For mobile, if your reputation in SEO isn't that important to you and performance, and you are willing to take longer speeds, I think you will be good if you have a 50 score. This is feasible. But below that, you're starting to get more laggy throughout the page, which is a bad user experience. So I think when we build web applications, we always look at, okay, look, I can make all those features. They work great on an M2 chip from Apple, an Apple Silicon chip, and they work great on my iPhone 14. But, do they work good on a Samsung from 5 years ago? Probably not, especially not if you have too many SDKs. So I want to encourage you, look for performance and try improving the performance of your web applications, because this is, I think, something that is very overseen in this community of building web apps in Webflow using Wized. And Wized is a great tool. You see, it gives you all the functionalities to build wonderful and web apps with an SEO score of 100, So I wish you all the best in your journey. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time, and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.